Hello,
Hi,
my dog.
Chan. You have been up since 4 a.m. this morning
What?
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
in China time.
Yeah.
Have you been? Oh, yes, because of the email. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh dear. Well,
Do
I
you
suppose.
sleep?
Yes.
Oh no, that the email was the setup time for you to get it at morning. I don't want it to bother you at night.
Oh, we don't have
Oh,
our
don't
emails
worry.
off.
It
Don't worry.
doesn't bother us at night. We just turn our email off.
Okay.
Oh
Okay.
dear.
Oh.
So to start off with, really well done. This is coming together so nicely, Ishan. You should be very happy. I honestly thought last week when Ming Chao and I were working out what we needed to do, I knew you could get there, but you've got there and you've got there a little bit more. So there's some things we need to do, but overall you should be very pleased with the work you've done. It's coming together very nicely.
Okay. I just wondering if I can uh catch up for the new date of the presentation.
Yes.
No,
Yep.
I think you'll be fine. Erin and I were just talking, discussing your work before our meeting, and yeah, we are very impressed with what you've done today.
Mm.
So that's really, really good.
Yeah, so this is very good news. So keep on working at the rate you're doing, and you'll finish with plenty of time, and you'll
Hi,
finish with
Max.
a say hi, Ming Chow. He's being very
Oh.
needy, aren't you? Yes. He's not used to because everyone's my husband Yishin used to work from home 2 days a week. I work from home 2 days a week. So he was only, and then my parents-in-law often came up on the day that no one was home and would play with Max because she has medical appointments. And my husband has got a new job and he no longer works from home. My mother-in-law has been a bit sick, so they haven't been coming as regular. So he's been home by himself a lot more, and he's not sure what to do with it. He's not very happy.
Okay.
So he's very needy when we're home.
So cute.
He's very cute. So yeah, so Ming Chao and I met before now, and you will, if you keep on working at the rate you are, we'll talk through some of the things we've got today. I think after today's meeting, and Ming Chao will tell me if you think I'm wrong, we can, after today, you'll be able to start working on your presentation. You'll be able to start putting your thesis together in one document and then start refining. So you will definitely be ready for the November, is it 1st, November the 1st
First is the
presentation
presentation, and then 10th is the document.
and you'll be more than, I think by the 1st, Ming Chao and I will be nearly reading the final draft for making sure it all works together and grammar and that. So you have done a magnificent job, particularly being in China for the whole time. So and we're here, so this is well done. I just wanted to let you know. I know it's been hard, but you have done a stellar job. So keep that in the back of your mind. We've got, what is it, the 20th. We've got 20 more days to push you through essentially hell. And then you can relax. So you're doing really well. Okay, cool. So for the analysis chapter, you are correct. What we've moved to, in a sense, is thematic analysis. So what you need to do is the methodology chapter, you need to go and tweak that for a thematic analysis. So that's using Voigt's. I know Ming Chao talked in research methods about using Braun and Clark. They're the two main references for thematic analysis. You can also use Corbett and Strauss's grounded theory when they're talking about open codes, because that's what thematic analysis also does. So thematic analysis, so you know the relationship. Grounded theory, if you remember from, yes, Max, if you remember for us.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah. So remember, the whole point of grounded theory is to generate a theory from your research. That is what the outcome is. So it's very in-depth, very iterative, and very inductive. But the first level is open codes, where you go and do the theming and sort of abstraction of, removal of data, I should say, from the original source. And Boyett sort of looked at the grounded theory approach and said, this is really complicated. What if we don't want to generate theory, but we still want to generate insights? What if we want to look at things, but we don't want to go through this entire grounded theory process? So he and some others created a thematic analysis process that started off from, you do the same step as removing the data from its original sense into open codes, and then you would go and you would theme it, and you could theme it either inductively or deductively. So you could follow then a subjective or positive approach if you wanted to. And it's a more simpler in nature. Doesn't mean the outcome is any less rigid or rigorous or what have you. It's just a different way of doing research. So that's the relationship between, and then content analysis is a more quantitative version of thematic analysis. It's for those that don't really want, for lack of a better word, the touchy-feeliness of thematic analysis. You know, I want to know what's happening with people. I only want to know about it on a surface level. That's content analysis in our context. So that's the sort of the relationship between the three. So they're the three you probably want to touch on very briefly in your methodology chapter, and then you will lead on to thematic analysis being appropriate, because we're looking at, we want to know what is happening. We're not interested in counting, but we also are not interested in coming up with a specific model just to do data set counting. We actually want to know what your literature has been telling us in the context of our research questions and our research objectives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I need to read the literature to.
Yeah, it won't take you long. I'm very confident that you'll be able to tweak this. If it's being a bit challenging for you to do this, Ming Chao and I can step in. Have a go. Ming Chao, anything you want to add with that? No. Don't overthink it. Just make sure your methodology is nice and clear. And we need to make sure we remove anything about the quantitative side of content analysis that needs to be converted to thematic analysis. So it's the existence of the themes that's important. It only has to appear once. We don't care. We don't attribute a number to it. So see how you go with that one. Ming Chao, while we're on this, on the methodology side, did you want to talk about what you saw in the presentations about the methodology of literature review and what you wanted just to flag?
So I attended the presentations yesterday, Ishan, and there were possibly 3 or 4 projects that used a lit review as a methodology. Now, there was one that was clear that it was a systematic lit review, and there were 2 scoping reviews. Now, what I found in their presentations is a lot of the students adopted a quantitative method or they adopted a deductive method. So what they've done is they've basically looked at categories, they put the categories in a spreadsheet, and then they've looked at the literature and they've plumbed them into the categories. So this is very different from what you are doing, because what you're doing is you're doing an inductive method, which is very different from how other people have done their lit review, okay? So what is important, and I think what is important to highlight in your discussion of methodology in the presentation, is to clearly state with a reference, this is how I've done my lit review. There was someone that also drew on the principles of Prisma. So you remember, Ishan, you mentioned that you wanted to provide a more stringent lit review, and so you were using Prisma and things.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure whether Prisma has got a quantitative component involved in the series of steps, but you just need to be careful in providing references as to how you are conducting the lit review. try and steer away from references that tell you to count the literature, because I think for a systematic lit review, there is actually a quantitative component involved.
There is for a systematic one, yeah.
And so we want to veer away from that, because we don't want your examiner to come back going, you know, you said that you're using this method. This method has a quantitative component, but you're not providing any quantitative data at all. Okay, so just check your references, go through the steps clearly, and make sure that you have, you know, provided the reference accurately, and you've adhered to all the steps that is required.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with using principles of Prisma, because that's what we said before. But you're going to have to make sure, as Ming Chao said, we justify the use for the qualitative side, the interpretive side, rather than the quantitative side. So just check that to make sure. Yeah.
Just make sure you don't leave any gaps for anybody to be able to, for lack of a better word, attack.
Okay. Yeah.
So try and fill in all the gaps. It doesn't matter if it says, you know, it's quantitative, but you have to address why there is no quantitative component in your lead. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So for your analysis chapter, let's talk about that first. The question you had first off was on page 7. It's reading, just as a general comment, it's reading much better now. Page 7, difficulties in COVID information. Okay, so on page 7, so it's under the complications code, Ming Chao, difficulties in the COVID information management.
Yeah.
So this is the only quote
this is only
that was associated with that fragment. What's the surrounding quotes on that fragment? Do you have it handy or not? Because if we have another sentence or two that might provide a little bit of context, maybe that might make it a little bit more.
This is the only one. Let me check again.
Yeah. What paragraph did it come out of?
The sub-theme is at the ER coding 3, the row 88 is the volume of information unmanageable, and it leads to the only one label.
So for that quote, even though it only leads just to that one label, is there a sentence after it? Because it looks like it's got a comma there. Is there a sentence after it that helps expand on it? Because when you read it, it doesn't seem to revert to volume or anything. It just says they're not following sources. If it's the only quote will make it work, we might have to tweak the introduction chapter a little, like the introduction of that code a little bit, but sorry, can you just hang on 2 seconds? Someone's at my door.
Okay.
Hello, how you going? Yes, thanks. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye. Okay, sorry, I'm back. Thanks.
I send the sentence in the chat box.
Okay.
There
Let's have
is
a look.
there is a sentence before it that it says that the consumers want to expand their information source, but they did not try to follow them. So this is the second sentence. On the other hand,
Yeah.
and the unsustainable tracking of COVID information, this code is leading to this final open code.
The difficulties in COVID management.
Yes.
So that might be that we could actually have, instead of that quote, we could have most social users did appear to have intentionally expanded their web-based networks during the pandemic to include credible institutional and individual medical sources. So what I'll do is I'll pop that in there now for you.
And then dot, and then
Okay.
Yeah. So see how what it's doing is it's still the same open code, or end up the open code, but it's actually it's helping tell the story a little bit better. Because it's saying, difficulties in COVID management. Well, this is now saying that they've actually increased their I've just done it for you. Oh, okay, you're doing it. Sorry.
Oh.
So here, if you look, you'll see that I've done it now. See?
Yeah.
So that should be, I'll unhighlight it. That's the quote now. I'll get rid of that. Delete this. So that quote now fits more appropriately with the difficulties in the COVID information management.
Okay.
Okay.
But don't you want to have the other perspective as well?
Oh, so have
So have the second quote but use dots. So you join the two quotes.
Oh, I see.
To show the, do you know, like
Yeah, hang on. Why aren't you undoing?
I'm not going to even try to edit anything because it's just going to be too complicated.
No, here we go. So,
too many cooks spoil the broth.
Here we go. Do that.
And then dot.
And then.
Whoa.
Hang on. And then. How about, so that's what you're thinking?
One, yeah. Because I think then that exhibits the difficulty.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you've got people who've increased their social networks in the first sentence, but then you've got they didn't choose to follow them. So it's all a bit muddled, which is what we wanted to illustrate. Yep.
Okay.
Cool. So that's that one. So the rest of your chapter, Ming-Chan, I think it's reading a lot better now. So you can accept the bits you've put in there, and we'll do a final read for that when the whole thesis comes together. So for all intents and purposes, the analysis chapter can just sit as it is for the moment.
Okay.
This thing just caught my attention. So if you go into the next port, figure 1 illustrates the number of blah, blah, blah. Figure 1 doesn't mean anything.
Yes. Yeah.
Figure 1. Which figure 1?
Yeah, so this here.
There.
I've highlighted it. It doesn't need to be so that. We don't have to have the quote in there. This is the quote that I said it doesn't show dynamic change. It's like, because you've got steadily decline. That's not a dynamic change. So this is one where we wanted to see if we could find a different quote to show a bit more of a sudden change.
Big change, yeah.
I just concerned that if there is first a grow and then a drop, then it's a dynamic change.
Yeah, a grow and a drop is a dynamic change, but the problem here is if we get rid of this second sentence, you've got the number of hashtag entries have steadily declined. That's not a dynamic change. It's a steady change. So, February 12th, the daily case confirmed peaked. That's a number you can use, but we want something about talking one day it was high, one day it was low, or 1 week it was high, 1 week it was low. Something like that to show that there were twists and turns, so people would get their head around the information and then it would turn on them and what they thought was true wasn't true, or what have you. So we'll leave that highlighted. So that I take it back. That's the quote. That's a good pickup, Ming Chow. That quote needs to be, see if you can find another thing for it.
Okay.
But other than that, it's looking good. Do you have anything else to say about the analysis chapter, Ming Chow? No. Cool. All right. So your discussion chapter. Really good job on this one. As your first run through, this was good. So there's a few things that Ming Chow and I will work you through. Your finding for research objective 1, that was really nicely discussed. We could probably do a little bit more later on, but from my perspective for that one, you've done some comparison, you've done some discussions. I need to read it through again to see if there's anything else we can draw out for your key findings and concluding statements. Ming Chow, did you have anything for research objective 1?
No, I was just thinking back to the methodology section. Is there anything in your methodology section that says that research objective 1 will be answered from the literature?
No, I did not mention that.
You need to add something there.
So I think, yeah, good point. Good pickup.
Okay.
Okay, so that's looking good. Research objective 2. This is looking nice. This is, you've gone and grabbed the themes and then you've started to do some discussions and pulling apart and looking at this research objective. Ming Chow and I think you have your first key finding, which at the moment will be something like, where did I put it?
Go back to the chat.
Something
about complications.
Yeah, so a key finding might be the complication. I'll put it in chat for you, but also
okay.
It's in chat. You need to have a look at this to make sure it works, because this is your research. It's just something that we thought might come out of it. So key finding is the preference of social networks. So it seems that consumers are wanting to go to social networks for their information, even though these require greater validation on their behalf. So if they went to a traditional or official news source, they wouldn't have to go and usually validate information. They've got one-stop point of call. But from what your thematic analysis is saying, they prefer the social networks, but it adds a cognitive load because they've then got to go and verify it, or they've got to rely on those other aspects to go, is this information correct? So that's a pretty good key finding for your research objective 2. Even though there's more work involved, they are wanting to go to social networks.
Yeah.
Have a look through to make sure that key finding sits well with you. If it does, you will need to find literature to discuss that concept about people migrating to social networks during times of stress or not, and people avoiding official networking sites to get information. If you find information about that, that's great. If you don't find information about that, even better, because you're then adding an insight. If you found information that confirms this key finding, it's still very good because you're doing it from a COVID perspective.
Yeah.
You're doing it from a different perspective.
Okay.
So that's how we discuss that key finding.
The good thing about doing it in the context of COVID is even if there's something out there already, you can go, you can always discuss and say that given that this is COVID and everything is different, this is still the same.
Yeah, this is still consistent.
If something different, you can then go, oh, because of COVID.
Because of COVID.
Either way, you're winning.
Yeah.
You're in a really great situation. You're winning.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So anything else to add for research objective 2, Ming Chow?
I'll just bring it up, but I don't expect you to do it at this stage. I just think that it'd be valuable for the entire structure of your thesis document anyway to cross-reference things, but that should be done more towards the end rather than now. But
yes, that's a good point. So when you're
in
discussing
case I forget
literature,
to mention it, just make a note of it. So when you're doing your findings, right, your findings are supposed to stem from your analysis. So make it clear to the examiner where you got this finding
which
from.
themes? Yeah.
Cross-reference back to which section, which page in your analysis chapter this was found.
Okay.
It will
in
increase
sentence?
In a sentence. So
substantially.
yeah, so your first research objective is looking at literature. So you are referencing the literature that you've accessed. If there's any literature in your original literature review, you can refer back to that and you say, as you can see in chapter X, section 2.2, this was discussed, the research has found, so you're linking that. The same with your research objective 2 and 3, and to some extent your overall research question. When you're talking about some of these concepts, you would say, you'd have your statement and then you'd say, this can be evident from the theme X, and then brackets, chapter X, section X.
What? Yeah.
Where this research found X, Y, and Z. It only has to be a sentence or two, but it links everything together really nicely. So the examiner then goes, right, we've got cross references through the research, so the analysis means something.
And if they want to look, they can always go back and look.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want them to do is to go, hang on, where did this come from? And then they plug through your thesis, and then they find more faults with your thesis.
Okay.
So you want to make everything very clear cut.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's research objective 2. Now research objective 3 is a good start, but this is the one that needs the most work. I'll be honest, Ming Chow has had a look at it more than I have. But there's another key finding in this objective as well, and this one, Ming Chow and I think is actually a bit of a doozy. It's a pretty good one, we think. Again, it's got to meet with your approval, because at the end of the day, Ming Chow and I can look through this and go, oh, we think this happened, or we think this happened. We haven't done the research, we haven't done the analysis, so we might be reading into things and it actually isn't the case. So this one, so I'll just put the chat to start off with.
Okay.
So I've started to say to Ming Chow, perhaps it's meant to be research objective 3. There's a key finding surrounding emotion or associative emotion with finding or the anticipation of finding information. And then I called it, you know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out. The acronym, have you heard of that before?
FOMO.
Have you heard of
missing out?
Have you heard of FOMO?
No, after you gave me the code, I just to find out it.
Yeah. So in Australia, FOMO is something that's big, and it's called FOMO, but it's FOMO, fear of missing out. And it's some of the generational inflicts on something is happening. I don't want to be excluded. I want to be included in this. So the next thing I said to Ming Chow, it's the fear of missing out, which is FOMO, but there's also the fear of being included, because I seem to remember when when I was going through your coding, there was some codes that talked about there was anxiety, there was the need to get more information, but there was also a need to avoid the information because it was becoming too much. So
Yes.
that was what I've said here. They're driven to seek information for control and security. So filling in the basic needs. So in that, there could be a discussion of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have you heard about that before?
Yes. I
Yeah.
used
So
this theory in the literature review
oh, you
chapter.
did too. Good. That's even better, Yishan. That's even
You
better.
can draw it all together.
Because you can draw that all together. So if you remember, the hierarchy is it doesn't matter if we're rich and famous or what have you. If we don't have our basic needs of security and safety, then we are always incomplete. There's always something. We need to have that base level human. And then once we meet each level of the pyramid, we then want to progress up. So seeking out the information is helping them address that basic human need. But in doing so, in some cases, it also brings a desire and a conflict to protect themselves from that information. So they've got that tussle between wanting to meet their basic human need, but also wanting to protect themselves from that. If that is in your research, if that is in your themes, and it doesn't have to necessarily be always the same person. And remember, it only has to be one case of this happening, or one study talking about this, or even suggesting this. I think that's a pretty important finding. So when you're discussing this, you discuss the themes, you discuss Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you would link back and forth with that one. This will be very key on you drawing out this key finding from research objective 3. So this is where research objective 3 will need a little bit of work. Did you want to talk a bit about that, Ming Chow?
About what specifically?
Research objective 3. It needs research objective 2 and 1. You had the back and forth.
So what I mentioned to you just now. Yeah. So with research objective 3, your objective is to identify the impact COVID-19 has had on consumers' digital information seeking behavior. Now, what you've done in your discussions here is you've just told us what how they're seeking information, but you have not actually highlighted there's any difference. So you know how your overarching research question is to look at whether it's changed the information seeking behavior. So this is an area where you can start to draw that out to answer your research question.
But we are not comparing to the classical models, so I can talk about the changes.
Well, the thing is, so what you've done here is you've just described how consumers seek information related to COVID. Yes? Okay. We need to find some way to bring in the theories and the models. So we've got 3 research objectives here. What is your overarching research question again?
It is
It's at the last.
yeah,
what
it's
impact has COVID-19 had on consumers' wellness information seeking behavior? On
what impact has COVID-19 had?
On consumers' wellness information seeking behavior
on digital
social networks. Yeah.
On consumers' wellness digital social network.
On digital social networks.
thing is, and I might be complicating things here, to determine the impact, you need to have a benchmark so that you know whether it's changed, you know whether it's not done anything. And that's why I'm thinking we need to have that here. An alternative is to have, but the danger of having that here is then that is very dangerously close to the research question. So an alternative is to tweak maybe R03 a little bit, maybe not use the word impact, or anyway, we'll think about it, and just analyze R03 in terms of how consumers have, what are the consumers' digital information seeking behavior during COVID? And then in answering the research question, you can then bring that in with your key findings.
Yeah, so you're saying we could almost, for R01, which is develop an understanding of wellness consumers' digital information seeking behavior, R03 could be tweaked to have develop an understanding of consumers' digital information behavior during COVID.
Yes.
And then some of this discussion can then also be put underneath the research question in addition to these information seeking behavior models and model of consumers' intention towards online social networks.
Yeah, so we bring in the models in answering the research question. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Ishin?
Because now that I'm looking at the research question, right, it's very dangerously close to R03.
Okay.
So the work you've done for R03, some of it will stay in R03 and some of it can be moved into the research question. But then what it will do, what I'll do, I won't change the title, but underneath, if I go here, and I go paste.
Some sort of reference to all the models that she's looked at.
Pardon?
We need to have some sort of reference to the models that she's looked at. There was one, I remember, there was one research presentation yesterday that looked at a series of models, and it's KDS's project. So what they did was when I heard the presentation, I was thinking something very similar to Ishan. They did a whole lit review on the different models, and then wanted to see whether the models were applied to I can't remember what it is. And essentially, this is what Ishan had done.
Yes, we talk about many models and.
So are you thinking for
scoping review on the application of behavioral theoretical models to the design of persuasive technologies? So that was the topic, and what this student had done was they had conducted a review of like, I don't know, 10 behavioral theoretical models, and then they had looked at whether in the design of persuasive technologies they had applied these models and whether they had evaluated. So that context of that presentation. Now, Ishan, with yours, you've done a review of information seeking models. Now, what we need to do is we need to decide, are we going to look at all of them, or are we going to look at one or two, a couple? So I think, Erin, the one that you sent out was the 1999?
1997.
1997, yeah.
Yes.
Are we going to specifically look at that model? And if we are, we need to clearly articulate why we're going to look at it with reference to that model.
Okay.
So Yishan, you had two models. You've got also a model of continuance intention towards online social networks.
Yes,
as well.
because we need to talk about the consumers' behavior on the digital social networks. So this is the connective one.
So in your literature review, you've mentioned a whole lot. This is where, in answering the research question, you can make an argument for why these two models are the ones that get applied to the research question. Would you agree, Ming Chao? Yeah, so this is where you have
whatever you choose, right? You need to clearly articulate why you've chosen that model. Why is it?
Okay. So I need to explain before I started to answer this question.
You could like in your lit review you've already briefly described them, right? So not briefly described, in-depth description of the model. But what you can do is when you're doing your final answering the research question, you can then refer back to your lit review section and you go, this model covers this. In investigating whether COVID has an impact on the information seeking, we're going to use this model as a, what's the word? Baseline, reference point, something.
Yeah.
To determine if there are any differences or, if there are any changes or anything like that. But when you're discussing impact, there needs to be a baseline that you can refer to, because otherwise, what is the impact?
Okay.
Yeah. Because what you're doing is you're not just providing a description. You're actually looking at whether there is any changes.
Yeah.
Which
Okay.
what impact means. It can impact positively, it can impact negatively. There can be no impact. But when you're talking about impact, there must be something that you can refer to.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
See how you go, because you've got we've given you a lot today. This is, as I said before, hold on to the fact you're doing exceptionally well. So, in a way, I say this with niceness. This is your fault because you've shown us you're capable.
But it's so hard.
Okay, so this is a good thing, but you're probably going to hate us over the next couple of weeks. So the last thing we need to talk about, so we've spoken about the adaptions needed for your methodology chapter and some of the adaptions already for your discussion chapter. The next thing you also want to start thinking about now is your research presentation, because that's due first. So you can now start working on all these concurrently, but we need to also make sure your research presentation is really nicely refined. It's a 15-minute presentation, that's the limit, and then it's question times after. I don't know, I've got to confirm with Sarah whether you'll be doing a Zoom stream presentation or whether it will be recorded. I've got to find out, because you're not the only person who's got an extension. So I will double check and find out. Ming Chao, you had some feedback, just some notes. So what we'll do, if Ming Chao will give you some feedback just to think of, and then you can start to develop a shell for your presentation. So, yeah.
So these are basically just things that I picked up on yesterday's presentations. Some of these mistakes I don't think you will make, but I'm just going to cover it anyway to be safe. Okay. Now, make sure that you acknowledge, this is probably not going to add or deduct your mark, but on your cover page, make sure you acknowledge who your supervisors are. Okay?
Okay.
Second, when you're doing your lit review, it is essentially that it is a lit review. So make sure you put in references, in-text references.
Okay.
Okay? Like I said, some of these mistakes I don't think you will make, but I'm just going through the list. Thirdly, you really need to articulate very clearly why your research is important. Some of the research presentations I've sat through at the end of it all, I'm lost and I'm gone, what's the point? Okay, so you need to clearly articulate your research. You need to make sure that so after you present your lit review and all that sort of stuff, your significance, you then need to present your research question and research objectives. Okay, make that like really, really clear. This is my research question, these are my objectives. All right, now at the end of the session, make sure you refer back to them again, because a lot of the times when I'm sitting through the presentation, they're talking about key findings and I'm like, what's the research question again?
Okay.
So make sure at the end you tie everything up together, and these are the findings that answer my research question and research objectives. Okay, now in your methodology section, it's fine to say I'm using a this and a that and a this and a that, but in your analysis, okay, make sure you provide what's the word I'm thinking? An illustration of how you have coded your data, how you have gone from codes to themes. Okay, I've sat through a few presentations whereby they've gone, I've done thematic analysis and I've got this. And I'm like thinking, well, how did you get that?
So I need to show the steps.
Show the steps,
Okay.
even if it's simple table format. You know, pick out a sentence and then show this is how you've coded, or maybe a short paragraph and show this is how you've coded, and then show how you've gone from the codes to your, you know, like your different steps. It doesn't have to be complete, but it just needs to be an excerpt of what you've done.
Okay.
You know, they can understand it. All right, and very importantly, make sure that you, however you document your coding in your methodology chapter, you actually reflect that in your illustration. Don't say one thing and do another.
Okay.
That's very okay. What else? Thinking. Analysis of results. So you need to probably, with yours, it is so big. But I think what you might need to do is you might need to, what do you think, Erin, like an excerpt of the results?
Yeah. I
I
wouldn't try and cover everything because you're not going to have time, but you also want to show the depth. You have done a significant amount of research. So your Prisma diagram could be used to show how many.
I'm quite sure that there's no one that has done analysis in such detail as you have.
Yeah. So use that Prisma diagram of, you know, number of records accessed, gone through inclusion, exclusion criteria. That'll be a really good one slide to introduce your analysis section, because that shows the depth of analysis and the process. And then we would go on and show an example of how you thematically coded. And then you would have another slide talking about your themes. So you probably only need 3 slides, maybe 4 for your analysis section.
Just because you only have 15 minutes.
Yeah, and that's the problem. But we want to show to the audience the amount of work you've done. And, you know, and then the fact that we had 3 other records that we were maybe thinking of putting in, that would have been like, but that they don't know, that you don't say anything about that. That's something we can do for later on. We can include that as a future research point. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right. Go on. And another thing that crossed my mind was don't rush your presentation.
Yeah, don't speak too fast.
So many students that just speak so fast, I can't understand what they're saying, and I'm trying desperately to and I give up.
When nervous, I speak too fast. But
yeah.
So Isha, what you need to do is you need to speak at this speed that you are talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretend you're speaking with us, and I would do some run-throughs of once we've worked out your structure, we will have time for you to do run-throughs. And before you practice, because you're going to practice with Ming Tao and I at least once, and before you do that, you would practice by yourself, and then you'd identify 2 things. You identify, obviously, how long the presentation is going to take. You'd identify the slides that trip you up, so the slides you get flustered over because maybe you're trying to get too much out, And then finally, you identify the slides that take up the biggest amount of time. Because if you go in, you'll know that if I speak at this speed, my presentation is going to take 14 minutes and 20 seconds. And I know that slide 3, 6, and 10, I'm either going to have a tendency to get confused or speak too much on. So you've just got that in your back of your head, because that means you'll finish the presentation more often than not in time, and you won't be rushing through. It's perfectly normal to speak fast when you're excited, nervous. That's fine. Try to remember to slow your speech.
Okay.
You're just going to be talking to us, essentially.
Yeah.
Just think of that. Just Erin and Ming Chao.
Okay.
And at the end of your presentation, so after your analysis and all that sort of thing, review your research question and research objectives again. Okay, and then talk about the findings and how they have addressed the research question and research objectives. End the presentation and thank the audience for listening. And then, you can either be proactive and say, are there any questions, or either Saurabh will jump in and go, questions for each time. Off presentation topic. Erin, we talked about this, but we forgot to mention it. The quotes in your
yes, thank you, Ming Chao.
analysis chapter, you need to put in a reference.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so all the quotes need to be adequately referenced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Normally, sorry, you go, Ming Chao.
If you were normally doing an interview, okay, and you provided quotes in the interview, you have to make it anonymous. So you would say participant A said this, for example, or interviewee A said this, right? But because this is a lit review and it's been published, you don't have to worry about it being anonymous. So you just provide a reference.
Okay.
Just the in-text citation reference.
Yeah.
So Rura and Wong /2021 page 3. That's all you need, because the rest will be in your, the long reference will be in your references.
In your list of references.
And you need to provide the page number, because you're directly quoting a passage. Yeah.
So look for how you would quote when you do a direct quote, and that's how you would do it.
Yeah.
We need to create Aurora and Wong. We don't have Aurora and Wong.
We need Aurora and Wong.
We need Aurora and Wong.
You never know. We might have a Lee. Wong and
We
Rura.
need Aurora and Wong.
Wong paper. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's basically what I gathered from yesterday's presentation.
So yeah, I would download, if you haven't already, the CRA for the presentations, and start working on the changes and stuff that we've talked about. But over the next day or two, when you think you need a bit of a break, get the shell of your presentation ready. Get the structure ready. If you've got, what do you think, Ming Chao? If we get Ishan to send us the shell of the presentation by Friday, that's all we want. Doesn't have to have anything in it, nothing at all, except the headings and a dot point of what you think. And a dot point of.
Send me a structure. We don't need anything at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the slides, we'd have just the headings on each slide and a dot point of what you think you'd cover. So just very brief, because I know you probably want to do a bit more work on your discussion chapter. But then Ming Chao and I can have a quick look at that and give you feedback. You want to go over no more than 15 slides, okay? 15 slides means 1 slide a minute. You will talk about some slides for longer than a minute, and you will talk about some slides for only 30 seconds or 10 seconds. So try to stay around 15 slides for now, and then we'll see what happens. Because that's the other danger. A lot of people want to do 30 slides for a 15-minute presentation, and you're just flicking through them. It's really, really quick.
Okay.
So if you can send that to Ming Chao and I by Friday, just do that via email. We'll have a look at that. When do we want the next? Do we want Monday, Ming Chao?
How long do you think you will need, Ishan, to? Oh, do we want her to think of any other key findings that she can come up?
Yeah, while you're
Significant?
working through the changes, now you can see how we've sort of talked about the two key findings we've found. See if there's anything else. Okay. If there's not, it's not a problem. If there is, that's great as well. So between now and do you think you'd be able to get a good draft and another go at this by Monday afternoon, Ishan?
For the discussion chapter.
For the discussion chapter.
So I need to modify the what's that?
Yeah, so the suggestions we've suggested to you today, so modifying essentially research objective 2 a little bit and research objective 3, and then starting on answering the research question. Do you think you'll be able to get a good amount of that done by Monday afternoon?
I think I can do it.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So if by Friday then you send us the structure of the research presentation, Monday you send us what work you've done for your discussion chapter and any key findings that you might have found as well. That means we can meet on Tuesday, which will make it the 26th.
First is a Monday, okay.
Yeah, so Tuesday on 26th. So that means if we met at 2 o'clock, which is our normal time usually, does that work for you both?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm
So
okay.
So I'm just putting that in now.
Oh, it's 26, isn't it? Yeah. I'm
26. Okay. Yeah. And what we'll do during that time is we'll talk about the final things and that you need to do for your discussion chapter and then your presentation. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'm sending that. So that'll be at 10 o'clock your time. So then what we'll do, if we can book in now, Ishan, if we can book in, what about Thursday next week, Ming Chow?
Yep.
Does 10 o'clock, I know it's an early start for you, Ishan, at 7 o'clock, but does 10 o'clock next Thursday work to do a run through of your presentation?
Okay.
Yep. So what that means is, I'll book that in now, that means that by Thursday next week, even if the presentation's not 100% completed, we can do some run-throughs and workshopping during that time. And that means you'll know by Thursday what else you need, which gives you basically Friday, Saturday and Sunday, if we need to do anything else, before you have to either present on the Monday or record and submit on the Monday. I think that gives plenty of time.
That gives her enough time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just put that in then. And I'll book that in for another hour. And we might not need the whole hour, but if we do, then we've got it, and that's important.
And if you've still got your presentation slides from last semester, you probably can revisit.
Yeah, you just update those if you like.
So the lit review and the methodology, you just need to update it to make sure that.
What was the feedback you got from the presentation?
They suggest me to use the Prisma and scoping review method.
Yep. Okay. Did you have anything about what was needed to be included or that you missed out besides the approach to the research, how you presented? Was there anything that was missing, or they were happy with how you presented?
Ishan, did Christy DeSalis give you that feedback for Prisma and scoping review?
What could you pardon?
Was it Christy DeSalis that gave you that feedback to use Prisma and scoping review? Do you remember which staff member gave you that?
She
feedback?
just said that maybe I need to consider if I need to use that as my
I know, but do you remember who gave you that feedback?
No, I don't know.
Okay. That's fine. it doesn't matter, you're using it anyway. So just, you know.
Yeah, it was just sent it by Chen, and he said that it was from two researchers that is doing the qualitative review.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I have to unfortunately go to a another meeting now.
Yeah, I've got another meeting as well.
Yeah, that has been a really solid hour. So I know you've taken in a lot of information. If you've got questions as you're working through things, please email Ming Chao and I.
Okay.
So the two deadlines we have is Friday for your presentation outline, and then Monday afternoon to send us your discussion chapter. So we've got time to read it on Tuesday for our meeting on Tuesday. You're doing such a great job. Really well done. Keep on working. We are getting so close now.
Okay. And about the numbers of literature I use in the Prisma table, so I need to remove the pre-COVID-19 part of it.
Um,
Sorry, I missed that question.
in the Prisma table, needing to include the pre-COVID literature review. We could include that as a gathered literature and then it's an exclusion criteria, or we could just ignore it. I reckon we include it as an exclusion, include it because you gathered the data, but it ended up being an exclusion criteria because it wasn't COVID-19. So what do you think, Ming Chao? Or do you want to have a think about it?
I can't think at this minute. This is the 300 articles, is it, Ishan?
Yes. Maybe.
But you did use the 300 articles, didn't you?
Yeah, I did not use it.
First research question.
Yes.
So
if I need to remove it, I need to make some changes to my methodology chapter to remove the searching terms and the criteria for the pre-COVID-19 part.
Okay, but when you're changing it, right, Ishan, be very, very careful because I know of people that will go and do the exact search term just to see if they generate the results. So be very careful when you're doing that and document it. So for example, if you say you've done this search term and you've done this search term and it has generated, say, whatever, 150,000 articles, right? Just make sure that somebody else that's using those exact search terms will not generate 300,000 articles.
Yeah, make sure they generate a rough.
Yeah,
it can be different because the internet changes.
It can be a little bit different, but just not like enormous.
Yeah, Ming Chao is right. If you use an explicit example in your presentation, and even for not so much the research, the marking of the thesis, but more the presentation, if someone has a computer on them, and you said, I used Erin search term and produced 5 results, and they type in Erin and produced 150 results, they're going to call you out. Yeah. They're going to say, this is not right.
Yeah. So you just have to be really, really careful, particularly following the methodology. Okay? All right. I'm sorry. I have to jump.
Yeah, I have to go.
Another meeting at 11 o'clock.
But well done.
We'll see you again. Well done.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll see you on Monday, Tuesday.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.